Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome back. In this shorter session, we're feeding back live and publicly on a series of two closed Chatham House Rules breakout discussions. The first of those breakout discussions was on cyber resilience and cyber defense, and the second was on cybersecurity and emerging and disruptive technology. So what we'll do is I will try to briefly summarize some of the main points from that first discussion of cyber resilience and cyber defense. Pirat Pennick from the NATO CCDCOE will add everything that was very important that I miss when I summarize part of that discussion. And then Raluca Cernatoni from Carnegie Europe will summarize the discussion that they had in the second breakout room on cybersecurity, emerging and disruptive technology. I'm going to stick a pin in that though, and hopefully not sort of abuse your sort of patience, because it literally is part of my rubric, just to introduce the institution that I'm representing today, part of the partnership, that's King's College London, specifically the School of Security Studies, the War Studies Department and its Cybersecurity Research Group, which is sort of synonymous with someone that I think, who will be known to you all and his work, Tim Stevens, who really runs and is the driving force of that group. But if you are interested in the work that the Cybersecurity Research Group specifically does, and sort of recent reports on NATO and cyber, active cyber defense, and on UK offensive cyber and the National Cyber Force, you can get that on the relatively user-friendly King's website, or through Google, as I guess everybody does. Or ask me and I'd be very happy to send you the links. So we do an increasing amount of cyber security and policy related research, and also have an increasing program of teaching in cybersecurity as well at undergraduate and postgraduate level. So thank you very much. That's the non-commercial public service announcement sort of over. For our breakout discussion on cyber resilience and cyber defense, it was a very, very rich discussion. I had 6 or 7 questions that I wanted to ask the panelists and didn't have the opportunity to. It could have gone on all day. And actually the only reason that it's a good thing that it didn't is because I've already got a sort of a list of 9 or 10 things scribbled down as takeaways from the discussion. So sort of have to start somewhere. One of the first things that we discussed was the development of military cyber capabilities by different European states and different NATO states, and a question of how to understand the implications of that development. And one of the paradigms presented was, to what extent does this reflect the militarization of cyberspace, or are there better ways of thinking about it? And we had an interesting discussion of the extent to which different people in the room felt how much progress had been made in developing military cyber capabilities in different member states, and also to some extent what the limits of that developmental process have been over the last 10 or 20 years. We also discussed military cyber from China's perspective, with a reflection on the limits to what is known, or what we think we know about the development of those capabilities, how they would be used, and the specifically urgent, I suppose, strategic context with regard to the issue of Taiwan and China's intentions in the shorter or medium term. We then had a sort of more conceptual discussion about how we clarify what we mean, and what our shared understanding of the sort of concepts and categories are when we talk about cyber defense and we talk about resilience, and the need not necessarily for a sort of a shared language in a sort of a literal sense, but a shared set of concepts and understanding, so that we're not talking across each other, and we try to make progress on those issues. We also talked about the pros and cons of being big and being small, and from the perspective of having a robust knowledge ecosystem. In some cases, being a small country actually makes it easier to sort of develop that that ecosystem of knowledge, and to really access the pockets of expertise that you have. The corollary being that the bigger you are, sometimes the harder it is to leverage all of the assets and knowledge that you have, because it's difficult to find them, particularly if you're in a very hierarchical sort of structure. We then had a discussion that sort of linked back to our previous session thinking about competition, strategic competition, how to think about strategic competition in cyberspace. There are at least 3 different ways that were posited. One was about how to embed values in technology and the competition to embed different sets of values. A sort of stratum of competition that's about economic competition. And then a third, which is more traditionally sort of political, military, pole mill kind of competition. Obviously, there's overlap and interconnection between the 3. Also talks about the extent to which, and this again sort of links back to this idea of militarizing cyberspace, that cyberspace isn't just and shouldn't just be seen as a zone of strategic competition. It's also this, tremendously rich and varied kind of global system in which there's a lot of different kind of interaction, social interaction, economic interaction. So it's sort of to underline this, a point was made about the fact that the processes to discuss and deliberate about the future of cyberspace aren't and shouldn't just be multilateral, they should also be multi-stakeholder, because it isn't just states, civil society, the private sector, have a lot of different roles to play. And there was some discussion, which again could have gone on a lot longer than it did, but was very rich for what it was, to discuss, the different ways of conceiving of what specifically the private sector, could and should be doing, and what the relationship should and shouldn't be between government and the private sector in that space. Related to that, we discussed the idea of coordination, the fact that it's actually very difficult to coordinate, and the need really to focus on that, the different relationships between technology, politics, and the role of the military as an institutional actor, and how you balance those 3 to optimal effect. And then conscious that Pirit's also going to be talking, and I don't want to be deleting things that are on her list as well. So maybe the last thing I'll focus on was that there was a discussion that I think probably bridges with the second group, which was about emerging technology and the relationship between developments in emerging technology and cyberspace, and the extent to which often those conversations are siloed, and they shouldn't be, because there is a lot of overlap. And specifically a question that I've also sort of thought about recently, which is how to come up with a sort of an assessment of the net effect of something like artificial intelligence on competition in cyberspace. You can come up with a list of reasons why there may be affordances, for on the offensive side or on the defensive side, but how do you come up with a sort of a robust totality judgment about what the overall net effect of that will be? And again, that conversation definitely could have run, as indeed could I, but I'm not going to. So I'll stop there and introduce Pirit to continue the flow back from the first discussion group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for this, and you covered a lot of space already. So just briefly, my name is Piret Pernik. I'm from Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, and a few words about our center. We have currently about 37 nations, both from NATO, EU, and partner countries, and we do research, we do cyber exercises, training, courses, and you will have a lot of information, of course, at our website. But coming now to some personal takeaways from the discussion. So to add to what Joseph already said, and to my surprise that we didn't spend a lot of time talking about offensive cyber capabilities or operational activities in the theater, or information and intelligence sharing, which I thought will be usually interesting subjects. Instead, we focused more on perhaps non-military activities, such as shaping the space through other means, such as regulations, international law norms, and standards. And one of the ideas was that we should actually think through more thoroughly what shaping means and how do we achieve that in cooperation with the private sector. And it was regarded still that this is a big challenge, how to get the private sector on board, how to incentivize them in terms of their own resilience, but also in terms of protecting and projecting our values and freedoms. The other piece that came out was that we should also think more through regarding the response options and imposing costs, and whether, for example, cooperation with private sector in terms of really attribution and releasing some kind of intelligence also entails vulnerabilities for them, and what are the vulnerabilities for the adversaries. And I think the one concluding takeaway is that China and Russia definitely are investing and have capabilities across the board. And we, as an alliance of democratic nations, are more limited in terms of the mandate and perhaps willingness to escalate and so on. So thinking through three pillars, what are actually the requirements for our strategic effects and shaping what are the solutions, and then having the tools and political will to implement that would underline my kind of summary. So with that, I would give floor to Raluca. Thank you very much. And finally, I would like to thank our partners for this amazing event. And I'm very happy it finally materialized. Thank you.
Thank you, Piret, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to present you the rundown of the breakout room 2, but also not very happy to stand between your lunch and this excellent view. So I'll try to be really short. My name is Raluca Cernatoni. I am a research fellow with Carnegie Europe, where I focus on European security and defense and emerging and disruptive technologies. And also we are a contributing partner in EU Cyber Direct, the EU Cyber Diplomacy Initiative, which is a consortium gathering excellent partners such as the European Union Institute for Security Studies and the University of Leiden. And we focus a lot on this nexus between new technologies and cyber policy, cyber governance, cyber norms, but also cybersecurity and defense, which was one of the topics, or at least the main topic of our breakout room 2, namely to understand and unpack this nexus and dynamics between cybersecurity and cyber defense and new technologies and emerging and disruptive technologies. Usually when I try to present emerging and disruptive technologies to students especially, I always quote Shakespeare, sorry for that. What's in a name that which we call emerging and disruptive technologies? By any other name would smell as sweet. Well, Romeo and Juliet for you here, but one of the main focuses of our conversation this morning was indeed to understand and unpack what exactly do we mean by emerging and disruptive technologies. So the definitional elements, but also the buzzworthy dimensions. And we had excellent speakers that engage with some of these technological exciting domains, such as artificial intelligence. And we heard a lot about quantum computing as well. But again, one of the main focuses was this notion of emerging and disruptive technologies as force enablers, but also as a very important domain for strategic competition between great powers. And by great powers here, one of the elements that was quite striking and very important was indeed to understand also the role of technological giants when it comes to driving the innovation game in some of these technological domains, and how to engage with technological giants, and whether such companies, private companies, have a notion of geopolitics or play more an increasing role in geopolitical and security and defense practices as well. So trying to understand this public-private dynamic, this came up again, I think, in the morning session, but also in the other breakout room, and also to understand the various innovation ecosystems when it comes to more security and defense oriented sectors, but also when it comes to the commercial sector. So what are the business models? What is expected when it comes to developing some of these technologies on the private commercial side versus the more security and defense side? Also, the innovation ecosystems here in Europe but also more generally in an Euro-Atlantic context. So this was quite an interesting, I think, takeaway from the conversation in terms of unpacking these dynamics between the civilian side, but also the security and defense side. Another interesting area was brought up, and how to connect the dots between various domains as well, like industry, academia, and government. So trying to find synergies between how research and technology organizations, again, other private sector actors collaborate with governments, and how to mainstream such actors into security and defense logics at the end of the day, while also promoting responsible and ethical governance approaches when it comes to such technologies. So another area that was brought up was indeed how to, first of all, ethically, but also responsibly research, develop, and deploy such technologies. And what are the challenges brought about by deploying such technologies or enabling technologies when it comes to cybersecurity and cyber defense? I'm sure that there have been other excellent ideas brought up, but maybe the last point that I want to bring about is indeed one of the concepts that was highlighted by Lucas Kello, that of the sovereignty gap, where a lot of our critical infrastructures, the technological innovation game, and also the exciting products coming on the market are in the hands of commercial actors and technological giants. And to better understand how, for instance, this control and also these dynamics impacts the future. So emerging and disruptive technologies, and looking also for the looking out for the present, but also looking towards the future, how to understand what are the challenges and disruptions that will be brought about by such technological exciting domains. So thank you very much again, and thank you to the partners once again, to Kay, especially Brett and Joseph, and bon appetit.